Hello. I built what is, so far, the best modular live improvisatory system I've ever built. And interestingly, it's also one of the smallest. Bit of a lesson there. The idea of this system is with no patterns pre-programmed. You should be able to start from absolute zero and play for at least an hour and take listeners on a journey. A completely improvised journey that is unique every time. And I recently premiered this system out at a night called Holding Patterns in Leeds, and in that set and other recorded practices I have, which I'll release over time, I have much room for improvement here, both in refining some of the sounds and the modules, and more especially my ability to play it. But I'm feeling like I'm on the right track and I want to talk about it. So the first half of this video, I'm going to do a deep case overview. I'll talk about everything in the system and how it's wired together. This mad droid system that I have with its motorized faders and additional drum sequencers. And then in the second half, I'll talk about the lessons, the theory, the things I've been learning about building live systems, technical gotchas you need to know before you play live, rules of improvisation, how I actually practice this, what I'm actually doing when I play it, and what could be better. What am I going to change and working on next? I've tried to make this as useful and transparent as I can, and there is a lot of information here. So note the chapters, and let's go. Before we talk about what's in it, it's really important that you understand what I built it to do. The idea was that I wanted to build a live improvisatory system where there is nothing pre-programmed, there are no songs of any kind, you just have to pilot the system and take it to interesting places. And my main thing was I wanted something that had riffs. I want melodies and bass lines and hooks to hook into. There are styles of music that I think are easier to make with modular synthesizers. It's obviously really hard to make something that is melodic because melodies often have to be constructed. They don't often just pop out at random. So I needed control to be able to nudge the melodies, nudge the randomness, something that the Droid offers. I was thinking about shows like Daft Punk in 96 and 97 with just these really fun sample collages and kind of, you know, this housey sound that I kind of love and miss. And I've also been listening to Susumu Yokota and Wata Igarashi. And I just wanted something that could kind of be in both camps. Something with riffs. Something that sounded a bit like the 90s and had that kind of vibe about it. The rave era. I'd had so much fun putting rave stabs in my modular that I wanted this to have that too. But the final two things are really important. The goal of any system should not be to sound just like someone else or like some other type of music that you like. It should be to sound the most like you, not like other people. Whatever it is, I had to hear myself through it. And finally, there's a contradiction that's really important. The way to know if your music is good is whether you feel feelings when you listen to it. If you feel things when you listen back to it in your heart, then that's good music. And I think it's likely that if you do that, then the crowd will come along with you. But at the same time, there still has to be a sense that if you're going to stand in front of a crowd, you want them to be entertained. I cannot escape that truth. And so whatever I did had to work objectively. It has to be something that people who don't know who I am like hearing it too. You know, it's what is in the room that counts. So it has to deliver.
Let's do a quick case overview. And why Droid?
Okay, so let's do a sort of super fast run through of everything that's in the case and talk about the Droid, and then we'll go deeper into all these sections. I have this sequencer system called the Droid. This is 4 tracks of CV and gate with control over the tracks from these buttons, these dials, and these amazing motorized haptic faders. Yes, these faders have notches and feeling in them depending on the menu that I am in. It's very clever. it has an additional drum sequencer, and the drum sequencer and my Droid as well have been customized by my great friend Effix Music. Enormous credit to him. We'll talk more about this later. He's helped me adapt these a little bit, but I should say right off the gate that I'm mostly using an off-the-shelf thing called the Motor Fader Performance Sequencer, which is a sort of bundle, a Droid bundle that comes with this program that runs in here. Then in terms of voices, I have 3 main voices. That's a Braids and a micro VCF, a Plaits and a magnetosphere, a Pony and an MS-22 for bass. The Befaco Percall takes these 3 voices and gives them envelopes, actually just a decay envelope, but you can't have it all. It's also a VCA, so it's a really good module for kind of creating really simple voices. And on this 4th channel, I have a sample drum. So I have an Erica Synth sample drum with banks of samples, and on the 4th channel here, I am moving through the samples and actually sort of scrubbing them to create instant sound collage. On the 2nd channel, I also have an additional drum sound. And then in terms of drums, I've got the Bohm kick module, which is also adding ducking and side chaining, is when the kick plays, the whole rest of my mix gets ducked against it, which is fantastic to have. That's because my entire mix gets summed here and then run through the Bohm. And the Bohm also has this kind of sick DJ drop high pass effect, which I am using occasionally and judiciously in the set. In terms of other drums, I've got the 808 hats, a 909 clap, and the LPZW Elster, which is an excellent 909 sort of crash cymbal, ride cymbal, and I can't think of the other one, hi-hat. And then I've got a DivKid run step for a bit of random modulation of the Braids and the Plaits, which is very helpful. And then in terms of effects, I have the Effects Aid doing delay, the Erica Synth ZDSP with the sort of semi-illegal backpack hack that lets me run the tip-top ZDSP Valhalla card. And I've built a mixing system using mixers to create 2 sets of sends for those things, and it's all summed together. And then in terms of the final things, the sort of mixing and summing and output, I've got a little mixer here which mixes the voices together so I can kind of trim them. And then I use a little switched Mult here to choose whether the snare drum goes to the clap or the sample drum voice, or the hi-hat is the open hi-hat or the Elster. The first channel of the sampler goes through a Polyvox filter, which is important. It's really helpful to filter samples down. And the output goes through the Endorphin's Golden Master, because it gives you this kind of multi-band, compressed, sort of improved sound. A lot of people at the gig mentioned that it sounded very coherent and sort of well-produced, which was very, very flattering to hear, given that there isn't a real mixer, there's no EQ or anything, is there? And I put that down to both the Golden Master and the fact that I use the kind of, I orchestrate the voices. You have to orchestrate the voices a bit more carefully, move their octaves up and down so they don't overlap, and so that things live in their own frequency spectrum naturally. We'll talk more about that in a sec. The Golden Master is definitely a nice thing to have. Also, there are 2 modules you cannot really see here, which are also LPZW prototypes, which are sort of prototype drive modules. And I'm using those to add just a little bit of sort of, drive and color. And sort of why the Droid? Well, we'll talk more about the Droid itself and all of the quite remarkable and magical things it does. But I should say that this video has a sponsor, which is the company who make the Droid, Der Mann mit der Maschine. Like a year ago, I made a demo of the Droid, and a few months ago, Der Mann mit der Maschine got in touch and were like, can we sponsor another video where you show the Droid as part of a live system? How would it work if you had one of these and you were doing a live system? And ever since I had the Droid, I had said to myself in the back of my mind, there will be a time where I will get my bum in gear and I will actually try the Droid as part of a live system, because there are so many clearly obvious things about it that are why I should do that I have to do it at some point. And I've just not had an incentive to build a live system. I've not had lots of other things going on. And the long story short is that Holding Patterns, a place in Leeds, got in touch and asked me to play. And these 2 things happened at the same time. And I suddenly realized, I was like, holy shit, actually, I will make a video that demos and explains the Droid as a live system, because I actually will do it for real, because I really want to use the Droid as my live system. And so why don't I do these two things at the same time? To not use the Droid hypothetically, but to actually use it in anger as my real live system, because that's what I wanted to do. So talk about a win-win. And the fact is, I have nothing really but good things to say about the Droid. You know, if there are drawbacks, I hope that they are obvious, which is to say, cost. The Droid is not a cheap thing, but the Droid is a boutique thing, and the Droid is also insanely unique. There is no one thing that does all of what this does. And there is no other thing that I know that has motorized faders that is also a sequencer too. But the other obvious point with Droid is just there is a sort of time cost as well. You know, it takes time to learn, as any instrument does, and it will take time to learn the systems to modify it. And the fact is, I think even if you don't ever own a Droid, I think you'll still find this really useful, because you can see the kinds of things it does, and maybe you have separate things that could do that. Okay, let's talk about voices. So I mentioned that I have 3 voices in this system. Let's just clear this whole thing. If I hold the clear button, then it will be totally cleared. If I hit play, an arpeggiator. This is a Braids. A Braids is, of course, a module originally made by Mutable Instruments, and this is the Michigan Synthworks clone of it, which is like a little small one. What I love about using digital voices in general is instant changes. What I need is something that can be changed really fast from one thing to another, and that is so very rarely an analog voice. You know, in this moment, it sounds like that. I do that, it sounds completely different. And the color in the instance of this mode changes the chord. There's a bunch of different modes, and then if you run them through a nice filter, the filter adds its own color. And so if you have the gift of sight, you would see that I have actually written some modes on the top. I did that because what you don't want to be doing when you're playing live is scrabbling for modes. Like, oh God, what next? So I've just written a short list of modes that I like that had a lot of variability in them, which is what I've got on there. And so you can change the mode and you can change the timbre and color. And another thing that I found really valuable is subtly modulating the timbre and color a little bit. I become very keen to have filters that have 2 CV inputs, because I want one for the envelope and I want another one to be randomly modulated a little bit. The secret to having things that can play for longer and be tolerable is subtly modulating them a tiny little bit. So if you subtly modulate things, they just sound better over time. And on this, I have this little trim module which controls the amount of modulation to the Braids. I think that's that one. There. Now, it should also be modulating the decay time a little bit as well. It's subtle. You hear that? Every now and then it goes rock. Turn it off. You're boring me, mate. You're boring. That's with modulation. So you see the importance. A little bit of subtle modulation will keep voices alive for longer. It's not optional. You need it. In my strong opinion. The Braids. There's not a lot to say. Braids is an amazing module, and the reason that I would go to this module, I just like it for lots of different reasons. I like the big clear screen. I like the sound of it. I like the modes. They're kind of fat and simple and chunky, and they're really different to one another, and it just delivers. It just sounds good doing lots of different things. And there's like folders and good like atonal things. There's like the VFOF. You know, this kind of weird stuff. Like, man, to have that and then to have CS80 saw. have that range is why you need digital oscillators. So the Plaits, well, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's a Plaits. Why are you not working? There we go. This filter's got a little bit of drive in it, so that's adding that kind of drive. But I like Plaits for the same sorts of reasons. Plaits obviously has lots of different modes. There's this the latest mode that was ever introduced for it adds this kind of orange section. This button is not working well, but it's got, phase distortion. And then it's got DX7. With this kind of feedback on timbre. And then different presets on harmonics. And I just like that sound. I love FM synths. And so, like the Braids, but complementary to it, it has its own set of tones and vibes. And there's 3 banks of DX7 sound, so 3 times 32. And then I've just added this little spectral LFO that the lovely chap from Spectral sent me. So I can do a bit of vibrato. That's just hardwired. Then there's this magnetosphere filter, which is quite a dirty little filter from EOWave. These two are great for sort of like, all the main sounds, the mid-range, just all tones. 2 digital oscillators gives you enormous scope. You can go anywhere with this, anywhere. And the real challenge becomes sort of managing it effectively. Hence, I've started to write the names of things like, and I wrote the names of the orange modes on here because you just will forget. You'll forget. You're sweating buckets. You're nervous. Everyone's watching you and you don't want to cock everything up on stage. You're improvising. So for God's sake, write things down on the system in places that will help you and they just mean that you make sure actions when you're playing because you will just get it wrong. What's the phrase? I think we've said this before. How much dumber are you on stage? Let's add a percentage. Let's say it's 30%. You're 30% dumber than normal on stage. Your mileage may vary if you had any pre-gig pints, which I would strongly advise against. Don't drink before you play. Go in completely stone cold sober because your wits and faculties are your best friend in this situation. And then, so the third voice is the Pony VCO. The Pony is a Befaco filter, Befaco oscillator that's really simple. And the MS-22 is a nice, tiny MS-20 filter. And this comes from the fact that in previous cases, I had such good success using an Intellijel Dixie and a Tip-Top Z2040 as a bass voice. Just having a deep, reliable, analog bass that isn't weird and complicated and changeable in digital. That is so nice to have. And the Pony's got this wonderful like wave shaping thing. You can wave shape it and it's got different modes. But I've just left it in square. I would like to have an LFO go in to control the pulse width, but I will need a attenuator trimmer, but I don't have one. I could put one in here, so maybe we'll do that eventually. You can add lots of resonance. And you can hear it does the weird MS-20 thing because it's the MS-22. But it's very hard to operate here. I obviously have these cables really in close proximity. And in an ideal world, what I'd do is actually swap the positions. I'd put the Pony under this cable mess and I'd have the MS-22 slightly out. But moving everything around is a nightmare, so... Now I'm using the Percall as a voice completion module. The Percall is really designed as a sort of percussion module because it has 4 decay envelopes and 4 VCAs and 4 volume controls and 4 outputs or 1 mixed output. So how useful is that? That through that one module, you can just put an oscillator, raw dog an oscillator into it, and you'll get a shaped, gated, enveloped with just a decay envelope output. So it's really useful. So in this tiny space, I get 4 VCAs, 4 envelopes, a mixer as well. I'm not actually using the mixer because I'm separately mixing so that I can run through my effects that I'll talk about in a sec. The obvious thing to say about this, the huge drawback, is the fact that I don't have attack, do I? I've only got decay. So I can't do string sounds, and in this sequencer, this also has the ability to have gate length, which I'm not touching at all. But that's a trade-off that I'm happy to make because I can just reach across and I'm manually doing gate length with this, which I sort of much prefer. That said, I would love some CV control, a little bit of CV modulation on all of these, just to keep things alive and interesting. I'm prepared to give up that kind of attack portion. Also, by filtering stuff down, you can still make kind of soft sounds that aren't soft attack, but aren't abrasive. So you make it work. Now let's talk about samples. So I've got the Erica Synth sample drum, and as I've said in other videos, this was inspired by another modular musician, a guy called Engineer. And Engineer is also using a small 104 6U case, not a 7U, but a 6U, and he's using the sample drum in this way, and I absolutely love it. And what it is that he's got banks of sounds, and he's kind of sample collaging through them. So if I run the sequencer, add lots of steps. Whoa, baby. Check this out. What is happening here? Good, that, isn't it? It's gonna rain. It's gonna rain. Go rain. Yeah, sorry, I got a little bit carried away there. So what is happening is that the Erica Synth sample drum is a sample module with 2 slots. And each slot is actually a container that can have like a lot of samples. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's like 60 or more. So actually what I have in the sample drum right now is this long list of... It's 64, by the way. It's 64, friends. I've got 42 vocal samples taken from 0G sample libraries from the 90s. And I've got all 42 or whatever loaded into slot 1. And then I have assigned CV to sample select. And then what you do is on track 4 of my Droid, I'm sending random voltages, stepped random voltages, and I can show you them actually if you see on the screen. Look at the steps. That's the voltage coming in. So in this way, I can randomly sort of scrub and sample and then tune them. So you then do this kind of instant live collage, okay? And on the fly, I can come in and I've got a few banks that I created. So if we play it, I've got a bunch of them, including J Brown. That's James Brown. Yeah, you get the idea, right? So this is what Engineer does, and he's got wonderful sample curation, lots of different banks that he loads up, but it's the same idea, and I really, really recommend it. The sample drum, what I like about it is the fact it's got a screen, so just there's no guesswork involved. Yeah, I've got a page through kind of live in a set, but you prepare these sets and various things, including the fabled rave stabs. See how much fun this could be, right? So it's just like that is a force multiplier in your set. Having loads of sample libraries that you can draw on, and I should actually clarify, not sample libraries, but curated sections of samples that you know work well together. And by the way, the other thing is there is an effects slot, which is just worth pointing out that you can load a effect into any of the like loaded banks, and I have a high pass built in, which is super useful. So I don't have to do the thing of high passing all the samples to make them clean. You can actually build this in with just a smidge of high pass that's loaded every time I load that bank of samples. And then the other thing that I have is in the second slot, I have a snare sound, and I've got like a little bank of snares, which let's play them. So you see I've got another snare sound which is on this bank too, and then I can move to the clap if I wish. We'll talk more about that in the drum section. Anyway, I could obviously also load another one of the, spoken word or singing or weird or James Brown things or rave stabs into that second slot and play them on here as well if I felt clever. We may get to that, but I'm trying to keep things simple and manageable at this point. Above all, the thing to say about this is that thing about how much of a force multiplier it is. It's really, really useful having a source of samples and having a way to scrub through them. What Engineer does is he uses a Turing machine to go into there. And he notes correctly, of course, that if you adjust the output attenuator on the Turing machine, that one knob action will instantly change how the samples are addressed by shortening and reducing the voltages. Then you get a different set of sounds all of a sudden. That's really valuable when you just need a quick change to happen. So, functionally, that's the same thing as me sort of coming in here and changing all of these down like this. Or you turn it up. So I can just kind of move my hand and just change everything. There's one little uber pro tip to say in here, by the way. In the perform section, you may not be able to see this, but there is a trigger delay system built into the sample drum. Yet another reason to love this module. That's because your sequencer might not send its triggers and its voltages at precisely the same nanosecond. And because this is a fast and sort of quite sample accurate module, those milliseconds matter. And so what you can do here is introduce a trigger delay so that basically the sample drum waits for 3 milliseconds. That was the magic number that I found, 3 milliseconds, to read the voltage coming off your sequencer and then make the change. take my word for it, you need this because it just means that when you send these stepped voltages and gates at the same time, then when the gate is sent, the voltage needs to be read at the correct moment. That ensures that it is doing it correctly. So it's great. Sample drum is great. Really recommend it. And as you can see here, I've put a note of let's use these libraries in this order in my set. I can't even remember if I did, but it's just good to have these things noted just to give yourself, you can, even if you're improvising, you could have a bit of a kind of, map, couldn't you? You could have a bit of I'll start here and I'm going to do this sort of thing and then I'll build up and then I'll break down. It can be helpful to have that sort of, thing. And also to remind yourself of what modes are good, just so there's less guesswork if you happen to find yourself in a pickle. I'll blast through the drums really quick because there's not a huge amount to say. These are the tip-top 808 drum sounds, which I absolutely love. This and just came through play testing how much I love the 808, I'm an 808 kid. This is the 808 hi-hat, and we have an accent thing here, which is nice to have. And then this is the Elster. So the Elster is a 909 module, the crash as well. And we can adjust the pitch and the length. The length is the best thing ever because you've got that just wonderful ability to go long and go short. That in of itself can be pretty much your entire set, I think. It also has this range slider, so we can make the range really high. So we get this nice crunchy thing. Same with the clap, by the way. The 909 clap just sounds amazing. I tried the 808 snare, but I just prefer the clap. And you get this trash control, which is lovely. And then hi-hats. Oh. And then, by the way, I can switch to the 808 hi-hats here. And by the way, that is being done with a Intellijel, the Intellijel switched multiple 1U module, which those of you may have seen on Instagram, I created a little trick because I want to use it as a switch to move the gates from the snare track or the open hi-hat track to one of two modules, but not at the same time. And so what you do is you put one input at the top, one input at the bottom, and then you use one of the switches to move which one it's connected to. And this is a way of creating a kind of junction. The gate goes to one place or it goes to the other. Or in the middle, it's technically muted, but I think it would get really head scratchy if you start using this as mutes. Best to learn that your mutes are here and that's where they live. And so what I did is I cut the module in two around the back in order to give myself two sets of switched mults just from this one module. And so it works like this. That's the 808. And if I flip it up to the Elster, you hear the Elster. And I've written on the thing which one it is. Never assume that you'll remember. I mean, if you're a clever person, maybe. That's to the Erica synth. It's drums. Part of the reason of having a small amount of drums came from the fact that I would look at people like Surgeon playing with very little percussion, but just well-chosen percussion. I don't think you need a lot. It's tempting to take like a whole, 909 voice set, but then you have to manage it, don't you? I'm not I think drums are maybe the part of my system that is weakest. But I think my lesson that I've internalized is kind of less is more. You don't need a lot. And if you kind of embrace lessness, then it just becomes part of the sound, if that makes sense. You know, if you have big, full drum back lines and very little melodic elements, well, that's a stylistic choice. Equally, I made a choice that I was going to mainly focus on melodic parts with a minor amount of percussion. And that may be, you know, a mistake, or it may be a perfectly fine stylistic choice, and time will really tell. But the point is, there's a choice. You know, you put emphasis in different places. You just have to make a decision. And you also have to just factor how many plates you have to spin. And I'm just here to say that I think a reasonable thing to say, especially going by how minimalistic Surgeon is that less is fine, mate. Just just really rinse a smaller amount of elements versus having loads. You know, it'd be nice to have effects, wouldn't it? Obviously it would, you know, choruses on the hats and stuff to keep it sounding more interesting. But, you know, we have accents and that helps a lot. And we can switch between things and that helps keep things fresh too. In here is the DivKit run step. The run step is sending random voltages, which, as I mentioned before, I'm sending into the voices. And that's a hugely important point, as we were saying just with the drums. Keeping things sounding alive with just a little bit of modulation is massive. So I'm glad to mention that twice. Maybe I'll mention it a third time by the end of the video. So that's sort of drums. And it is kind of modulation. We should say more about modulation. I guess that would be the weak point. I would love to have a lot more modulation. Ideally, I would have the whole case being slightly modulated by a Turing machine. That would be amazing. But as you can see, if you can see, there's very little room in here, and I'm making do with the run step. What I could also do is I could mult the pitch sequencing outputs because they're a nice stepped voltage and they could be modulating things in a way that was useful, but I'd probably want to use some attenuators. I have in here got some of these little like EO wave flying attenuators. I should also mention that the 2 HP trim is a fantastic attenuator. It's 2 HP. It's really small and the trim is passive. So what I've done before is take the trim out of the case and have it sort of blue tacked or taped in the runs above the screws. There's nothing to stop you doing that. You don't need to have them in the case. And if it means that your voices are being more modulated a little bit, then absolutely fantastic. I mean, the other thing you could do is use mults. I could be multing this. There's space here to have a mult or something, you know, or along here I could have mults and then use my trimmer and just send a little bit of this step voltage into more things. I like it when the step voltage changes with the voice. That is to say that when the gate of the voice happens, then the modulation happens as well. That creates a unified feel. And so I've tried to do that with the run step. I've divided it so that I think at the top two, is it? Yep, it's the top two are going to, I think, the Braids. And then the bottom one is going to the Plaits. I thoroughly recommend that you slightly modulate as much as you possibly can in your case. And if you haven't got modulators, then you need to reuse things that you already have, run them through attenuators, and then feed them in. There should really be no free CV modulation slots on your modules. And any manufacturer who doesn't put input attenuators when they could, I think should be slapped with a wet noodle. So I've got this little Spectral LFO, the kind dude from Spectral sent to me. He's making DIY modules. So by the way, it isn't something he normally sells a great deal, but you can contact the guy on Instagram. He makes really nice stuff, including a thing that is very interesting to me is this that he sent, which is a 4 HP OTA Roland style filter. It unfortunately only has one CV input, but it has this ping input, which is interesting. So I'm curious to try. I might swap the magnetosphere and try this out. I haven't loved the magnetosphere. It's just not quite the sound I want. I want more of a Roland sound. You know, no diss on the magnetosphere because it's just, you know, filters are like ice cream. What I like isn't necessarily the flavor you like. There's no right or wrong when it comes to filters. So modulation is a weak point here. We don't have a lot of it. Let's talk about effects. So I have the two great other flavors of ice cream, that is reverb and delay. These are the two effects that I wanted to have. And for delay, I have the effects aid. Now the effects aid is this. The effects aid is this amazing multifunction module. And the FX Aid is based on this, isn't it the Spin FE chip or something? What I've sort of, my impression I get is there's this kind of chat about the FX Aid like it's sort of not, you know, because it uses this spin chip that other things use, then there's something not very special about its sound. But I'm here to say that I but it doesn't make sense to me, because I consistently find the FX Aid to be a really good sounding effect. I really like it. I like lots of the effects that I hear it do. And in this instance, I'm just using this one mode with the light at the top left on and the light at the bottom right on. I haven't gone into any of the other modes. But if I was, you know, in a few years maybe, when I'm like the master of this and not the apprentice for it, I'll be going in those. But what's to say? What's to say is that the sound that I chose is this really nice sort of stereo delay that has filter, feedback, and time. I have written on the top of the knobs in stickers what those are, because once again, you're 30% dumber on stage. You won't remember. You will not remember which one's which, and you'll get it wrong. Or you'll hear it howling, and you'll be like, where's the howling coming from in the case? And you'll look across, and you'll forget which one is feedback, because you'll see that it's over, you know, 70% or whatever, so it's feeding back. Label your things. And that's also why I haven't changed the mode much, because I don't need to. Like, there's enough in here to be playing with. But yeah, you've got filter, you can make it darker, brighter, and add feedback. Another thing to say is that it is not clocked. And there would be a time when I would say that I would fully reject non-clocked delays. What truck would I possibly have with a non-clocked delay? But I'm here to say it's fine. You know, if you have a tempo that you work at, you can reach across and turn it, and you can kind of make that part of the performance. I don't have any problem finding kind of nice, satisfying intervals for this. I think it sounds great. So I thoroughly recommend the FX Aid. Oh, and by the way, it's 4 HP. Can you see why I would really love it? And then the other thing is the reverb. So the reverb is this. Oh, Sean. Mate. I don't think you need me to tell you that Valhalla DSP make the best plugins for reverb and delay. I have bought every Valhalla plugin with my own money, with the exception of the Future Verb, which just came out and which Sean sent me a beta of kindly. I've interviewed Sean on my podcast, Why We Bleep, before. You should listen to that. But the short story is that this is an Erica Synth Pico DSP, which is Erica Synth's 3 HP like DSP effects unit. But a company called Xodes, Xodes, created this like hacky backpack where you desolder the chip on the back of the Erica Synth Pico DSP using surface mount desoldering techniques, and then you solder in, I think, or no, you just desolder the thing, and then you push on this backpack, and then you can insert into the backpack a tip-top ZDSP card, and it will load and run on the Erica synths without any other modification. And that's because the tip-top ZDSP uses the same platform as the Pico DSP. So the cards are actually compatible, but you need this kind of hacky way of putting them on. And so behind this panel, sideways and pointing down into the case, is a Valhalla DSP tip-top ZDSP card. Just awesome. I really like this pink mode, which is what I've been using. I haven't messed with the other modes much. And the one thing to say is that because of the hack, it's always fully wet. The output doesn't have a wet and dry control, but that suits me fine. As I will explain the mixing in a sec, I need it to be fully wet. So it's a 3 HP Valhalla DSP system for Eurorack is effectively what we create here. So small wonder that it would find its way into a case where space is at a premium. I cannot think of there is no better reverb, in my opinion, for that size. Obviously, not something you can just get off the shelf. It takes time and effort and soldering and fiddling and all that jazz, but it's totally worth it. But the thing to talk about is mixing. So how am I mixing in this case? Because, of course, that's a bit of a question. As you look at the case, you're like, where's the mixer, mate? Where's your like performance mixer? Where's your Befaco hex mix or something as I've used before? Don't get me wrong, love to have one, would be amazing. The mutes and sort of volume and proper sends and things like this. But the reality is, it's modular, mate. You can make things work with the correct modules and a bit of thought. And so what was necessary, what I actually needed was I need some kind of accessible volume trim so I can turn things down. I need to mix everything together so it can go through the Bohm, which I'll talk about in a sec. And I want 2 effect sends to send into my reverb and delay. Well, how am I going to do that? Very simply. I'm going to take my voices. All 4 of those voices go into the 4 inputs of this Intellijel attenuator and mixer module, and then they get summed together, and then they go into this happy nerding stereo input module, and all my drums get summed together as well into this tip-top mix 7. When I say drums, I mean everything except the kick, and then that also goes into this, and then the stereo outputs of the 2 effects go into the 2 stereo remaining inputs of that happy nerding module as well. So what this module is now containing is 2 mono signals, which is the sum of all my voices, the sum of all my drums, and the sum of my 2 stereo effects. And then how are you doing sends on the effects? That's very simple. What you do is you take copies of any of the voices that you want to put on a send, and you send those copies to 2 mixers. And then the outputs of the mixers go into the inputs of the effects. This means that effectively what I'm doing with the mixer is I'm creating a little mini blend of all the voices that I want to send into the reverb. And then out of the reverb will come that mix fully wet. And then I will sum it together and I'll be blending it with the dry signal to effectively create a send in a modular way. And so how do I know which is which? I've got a bit of a kind of order here. The top 2 are always the Braids. The next 2 down are the Plaits and the Magnetosphere. The next one down is the sample collage range. And then on the bottom one, on the reverb, I have the percussion. And the bottom one for the delay, I have the Pony VCO. And in my testing, I just found that it sounded better to have, the bass be delayed as an option. And it sounded better for the percussion to be reverbed as an option. I just like that kind of more ambient, selected ambient works, 85 to 92 sort of, ambient 808 open hi-hats, just to, it's built into my DNA. So that's mixing. I mentioned earlier that I have 2 of these LPZW Proto Sats, which are prototype saturation modules made by LPZW, who made the Elster, which Kay, the guy from LPZW, kindly gave to me. And I can turn this up to drive the system subtly. Or not so subtly. Nice to have, right? Just a little bit of it. I have just to thicken it up 15-20%. And I also have some, I think, going through some of the drums. I'm pretty sure I've got the snare going or the clap going through one. I just like having a little bit of color on the whole system. I think it's really valuable. Obviously, you could use any number of output color modules, stick the whole thing through a Boss distortion if you like. But a bit of color, it really helps, obviously, because if things just sound very clean, that's all right. But I just think it's nice to have some vibe. And some of these modules are quite clean, so they benefit from a bit of crust and crunch and a bit of, vibiness. And I don't mind. Some of my practices, it's been, I've been driving this magnetosphere and it's got this kind of crusty edge, and I don't mind that. I think it's nice to have a little bit of vibe. So you might want to consider ways that you can inject distortion and drive, even just a subtle little bit of it. I know, like, my friend Affix Music has got the, the music thing, stereo drive module. I think he's running a lot of his elements through that. That sounds good too. So there's lots of options at different price points. Let's just talk about mastering very quickly. That is to say that I'm using the Endorphins Golden Master here, sort of underneath this enormous bird's nest. There's not a lot to say except to say that I really like it. It's doing some very useful things. I mean, actually, I don't even know how to turn it off. Is there a bypass or something? I've barely touched it, as in I don't mess with the core sound. I've just adjusted the input gain till it kind of sounded good and the output gain, and I've not messed with it anymore. But what the Golden Master is doing is basically the same kind of thing that a TC finalizer would do. Those of a 90s persuasion would remember at the sort of mid to late 90s, there was a whole thing of TC finalizers, which are made by TC Electronic, and they were sort of all-in-one mastering effects units that had multiband compression and EQ and limiters. And the idea was that in the age of hardware, you'd run your final mix through this 19-inch rack mount unit, and you'd get a kind of polished, better, fuller, more sort of production-ready, more radio-ready version, a mastered thing. Of course, things like Ozone just put paid to the notion of hardware finalizers. But I bring it up because, of course, that's what this is inspired by. And have you not considered that having a TC finalizer on the output of your modular would be a really, really useful polishing tool, so that your kind of rough, organic, handmade, crazy machine would be limited and a little EQ'd and a little multiband compressed and kind of tightened and pulled together? And I've heard, there's a friend of mine who mentioned that there is a producer that uses a thing called the TC-DB Max, which is a kind of higher end finalizer in their live techno percussion things. And Julia Bonder from Endorphins used to use a finalizer in her system as well. And I remember my friend DivKid telling me that he went to an event and he was hearing a whole lineup of musicians, including Julia. He said when Julia played, and obviously there was more to it than just the mastering compressed. She's obviously an amazing musician as well, but Julia was using a finalizer, and he could notice with his mastering hat on, wow, it just, even through a fairly average PA, there was a notable difference in her sound to everyone else's for many reasons, but not excluding this final layer of polish. So I really, really recommend something like the Golden Master, either the Golden Master itself or a finalizer or a DB Max. There's this whole range of kind of 90s units that you can get for a couple of £100 maybe, and you might just find that it's an amazing extra final polish on your modular synth, which could be a bit rough around the edges and have some stray peaks, almost certainly a few stray peaks that you'd probably like to rein in. So that's mastering. I should very quickly mention the Bohm, which I've made like multiple videos about now. Except to say that the Bohm is this digital kick module that I've made a big demo of. And it can sound really rather large. But the main thing to say about the Bohm isn't just that it has lots of modes and you can change them, use the preset management thing. But for me, the real ace in the hole with the Bohm is the ducking in the effects, is the fact that it's a really solid sounding kick these feel very nice, these are very easy. I like keeping it on the same mode and just sort of changing up the sound as I go, but over time I'm sure I'll get into the preset system more. But the fact that I can duck against it. And just for the avoidance of doubt, this is ducking in effect. So if we get some stuff going on with the sampler, now we've got all of this sort of muddy stuff going on. We've got loads of reverb, we've got a sample going on, and I've got bass sort of intruding over the same frequencies. If I turn up the ducking, you hear it? It does that. It creates that wonderful kind of sucking sound, but used subtly, it just allows that to poke through. And if I then have a softer sound, I can turn up the ducking and that soft kick pokes through as well. There. I just do think that this is a tremendously useful thing to have. It's really hard to make that yourself. It takes lots of modules and finessing to get it right, and the Bohm just does it perfectly because the Bohm is digital. I assume it's using some spectral stuff to do it. But I just want to mention the ducking side is chef's kiss. Oh, and this as well, which is the effects. And I have it in the rave mode, which is slightly more resonant. And this is the ability to add like a high pass. Which if you're doing techno, these things are kind of a trope, but there is value in them. They do communicate to an audience that something's about to happen. And if you listen to players like Colin Benders, missed it, was that one. Then you will hear Colin using high passes and kick drops as a way of introducing new elements. He'll wait till the end of 8 bars and he'll remove the kick, and then he'll introduce new elements at that point, and then as the next set of 8 bars rolls around, he'll bring the kick back in. And you can do it with a high pass as well. Look, so it's high pass, and then I'll think to myself, what goes next? I'm going to do this. And so this is an integral part of that kind of structure, that kind of classic techno structure where you're using a high pass to communicate that something's going to change. And it just helps the tunes kind of make sense. Because the alternative, as we'll talk about this more, is that you just slowly progress things as you go. That can sound more incoherent, potentially. But this high pass thing, it's really valuable. I really like having the duck. I would almost go so far as to say that's essential, but it's just really good to have. Otherwise, you have to mix things really carefully, and things do get chaotic in a mix, and having that there is just a guaranteed reason for your kick to poke through. Before we talk about the Droid, I want to mention one final thing, which is cables and cable ties. As I posted pictures, loads of people have asked me about these twisty ties that I have. What are these? And so I just thought I'd mention that. These I got off Amazon. You can also get these off AliExpress. They are silicone cable twist ties. I think if you look for silicone twist ties, they're basically a sort of strip of metal that is coated in silicone with kind of squidgy ends. And that means that they've got metal inside them. Obviously, that's what I just said, mate. Well done. But it just means they hold their form. So they're quite useful as nice cable ties. You can put them around a bundle and then twist them round and hold things together, and they stay where they are, for the most part anyway. I've used real cable ties in here as well, which you can do too. The other thing to say is just about cables. If there's one company I cannot recommend enough, it is Tendrils. Tendrils make these low-profile cables. So you can see they have short right angles. And so what that does is it means that all your connectors have a very low profile. They're slightly below the height of some of the knobs as well, which is delightful. So not in uniformly, but for the most part, it means that you can make it so that the knobs are still accessible. Tendrils also have these kind of stacking versions as well. Obviously, you have to do a bit of cable management, sort of, you know, twist the tendrils the right way round so that they all kind of interlock, but you can make it work. You know, you'll find ways that you can make them fit into lots of quite compressed spaces. And the best thing as well is the stacking ones neatly lift over the basic ones. So if you have a stacking one next to a basic one, they'll sit over each other in this beautifully straightforward way. So I really recommend Tendrils cables, and I'm glad to use them. Yeah, cable management, mate. You know, you sort it the best way you can. So let's talk about the Droid. So the Droid is my sequencing system that's in this, and it's powering the 4 sort of pitch and sample things, and it's powering all the drums. And its size in my case is a reflection of how important I consider it to be. I am more than happy to give up a third of my case and have to absolutely cram voices in what tiny amount of space remains, because the reality is that I don't think voices are the most important thing in modular. I think your sequencer is the most important thing, and so that comes first. And so what is Droid? Well, Droid is a system made by a company called De Machine. The idea of the system is that you start with the brain, which is called a Master 18 in this case, and you add onto it control modules. And they sell these generic modules that some are just buttons, some are motorized faders, some have some knobs and some buttons or other combinations, and some are just endless encoders with ring lights around them. And the idea is that you program the brain to run your own little sort of reactor patch, your own kind of brain that you've designed and that works how you want. And it can really be pretty much anything you could imagine. That is to say, you could have a very generative thing where you have basic controls and there's all of this clever algorithmic stuff happening behind the scenes, or you could just have a really dumb, simple thing that's just a step sequencer with different pages and so forth. And what I have here is 2 things, basically. One thing is a Droid sort of package that they sell. And our package is called the Motor Fader Performance Sequencer. And this package is the brain. You get a Master 18, you get a 2 knob and 8 button, you get a 32 button, and you get 2 sets of motorized faders. I made a video about that about a year ago, and you can watch that video. I'll talk a little bit here, just kind of give you a short version of everything it does and the modifications that we've made to it. But just know you can buy that by itself. And actually what I'm using is basically that. It comes with the brain as well. So it actually comes with the stickers and it comes with the sort of pre-programmed sequencer. So if you're interested in this, you can actually just kind of buy most of this as one thing. That said, there is an addition here, which is this B32 and E4 and trigger outs that are coming from an X7 in this case. And what these 3 things are doing are adding drums. And I'll explain them in a sec. And the main thing I want to say, above all things, is an enormous and unfathomable amount of credit to my friend Christopher, aka FX Music, because Christopher has created this mixture of algorithmic and hand-makeable drums, which I have in this B32 edition. And he has also customized the Motor Fader Performance Sequencer and made some sneaky little changes that I asked for, which I'll explain in a sec. And I just want to point out that I didn't do the modification myself. FX Music did it because he's absolutely badass. So let's talk about how it works. Mate, how long have you got? Okay, so how do I put this? The simple fact of what this does is that it lets me send 4 lots of CV and gates, and I can put in melodies exactly as I want over multiple steps and pages, or I can use randomness and get a random sequence. Or I can do both at the same time. And in so doing, I've just randomized all of the pitch and gates of all of the 4 sequences in a few seconds. The thing that this reminds me of is a Turing machine. This luck button is like I've turned a Turing machine dial and I've let it turn into something random. But when I let go, it stays, okay? And I see where it is, and I can reach out and I can adjust the fader. and fine-tune that randomness if I so wish. The only way that this is possible is with motorized faders, as this has. The other thing, just to say about this, is that you have this thing where it's got notches. It has haptic feedback based on the motorized faders. So I feel the notches of the notes that I am selecting. And if I remove notes from the scale, then there are less notches. It's really freaky. Just two there, you see, top and bottom. And as you add more, you see the faders click back into position as they find the notches that now suit the available amount of notes. And there are many features and things in here that, you can use to sculpt sequences in various ways. And I think what I'll do is I'll actually just make some riffs and I'll just show you how we do it. That's probably the best way, right? So if I clear everything, I hit play. And then we're looking at the note screen. This is notes. And I could push on here. And that's this voice because I'm on track 1. Track 2, 3, 4. 1 is always this Braids voice. There is a new firmware that if you move a fader, it will also engage the note, which is quite useful. You get used to it. So you go, I want to have that note. Notch it down 1. Adjust the length. Okay, let's double that. We hit copy. Fix Music created this wonderful thing where it copies and doubles. So actually, instead of the original copy behavior, I'm now on page 2. Do you see this is on page 2? Come to the velocity page and adjust it. Let's do page 1. Because I've got velocity going into the filter. That's it. What else can I do? I can come onto this track page, change the pattern, which is changing how it moves through the sequence. And there's a bunch of different patterns. Forward, back, ping pong, and sort of ones that go, 1 forward, 2 back, and all these kinds of look. I can then come onto this page, which looks like a horn, and now I can see octaves and diatonic shifts for all of the sequences on one page. That's this one here. So I can move it up octaves, or I can move it down into the bass register. Let's get another voice going on. Let's copy it. If I come back to that page, here's the octaves for that one. And then diatonic is the semitones. Always in key though. And if I push this button, it will return to the default, which you can do as a performance thing. You can sort of move it off the bass line and then bring it back. And then I've got little things that I got added in by my friend Christopher. I wanted it so that I had buttons to take me to immediate step values. Like I wanted just to be 5 steps. Now it's a 5-step sequence. Don Buchla would like it. octave page. Diatonic shift it. Move it back to the default. Move the octaves to the default. Then I'll come to this page and I'll do some random for luck. What have I got here? So this is a rave stab that I had to tune. So you saw I was using handmade rhythms or handmade patterns, and then I was also using luck as well. I can just change this. The other thing is we added a page so that I could change the range of luck. Actually, this is a fixed music thing, which is the ability to sort of have ranges of luck like this. So this means that when I run luck, it's within a certain band. Yeah. Another really cool mode that's in here is AAAB. This is one of the ones that's in the Motor Fader performance sequencer, but I mention it. If I come here and I'll run this in a normal pattern. Oh, octave there, please. It's nice, isn't it? What it does is it plays the first 8 steps 3 times, then it plays the final 9 to 16. Inverts things, so high becomes low, low becomes high. That's a nice one just to randomly push and get, a big change. But then the sort of final kind of key things, there is the ability to deselect notes from the scale and stuff, which you can do, which I haven't messed with much. But they're there. There is also rep and pat, which are like Metropolixy style things. I'll let you watch the other video that I've made about, I'll talk at length about it in there, as well as ratchets and things. But I haven't messed with those loads because the reality is, you have a lot to do on stage. I'll talk more about this in a bit, but I just kind of am finding the features that I enjoy using the most on it, and I'm learning the best ways to manipulate them to get what I want from it. But there is a sort of big addition that we made to this that Fixed Music helped me with, which, just to be very clear, he completely did, but to my specifications, which is this. So we've got this kind of 4-stage transpose sequencer built in. So if we run this... If I lift these 4 dials, 4 faders, it's going to transpose these stages. And then if I introduce other elements, good that, isn't it? Now I am learning the best way to kind of bring this in because it's pretty seat of the pants. You can make stuff go quite wonky. Yeah, it kind of works, but you really want to get the right one. other thing I'm going to do is try and bring in an arpeggio. Oh yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd like to invite you to try and do that on any other sequencer, my friend. Because that, not to like be all slap downy, it's just true. Like that kind of integrated transposing, everything's in key. There's an arpeggiator that's also being shifted while my other sequences are being shifted, and I can manually play those in, or I can use luck and randomness, and then I can also change that because I can actually, the faders literally moved the positions and I can feel the notches. No other sequencer does this. And so there's something I want to say about this before we move on and talk about the drum part, which is that I said to myself reasonably, if you can't make the droid work for your live system and be the music that you want to hear, then I really don't think that there's any other sequencer that you need to be considering. And that's sort of obviously true and also not true, because as we're about to talk about in a bit, you can make any sequencer work with enough practice and sort of other accommodations and things. You can make anything work. But I reasonably said to myself, there was no excuse for me not to make this work, because this is so obviously powerful and capable and tunable and customizable. The one thing to say about customizing the Droid is that with the motor fader performance sequencer loaded up, the RAM is quite maxed out, so it's hard to then add more things. What you actually have to do in practice is remove components. That then frees up RAM, and you could then add something into the space. And so, for example, the preset system in here, we're not using it, but we actually haven't removed it. But if we did remove it, then we'd potentially open up more RAM to do things with. And removing some of these things has helped. There was something else. What was it? Activity. I removed activity because it was just a step too far, a thing I probably wasn't going to use. Probably could have done if I learn it. But the point was, you can take things out and put things in. But if I can't make this work, what excuse do I have? Absolutely none. So the onus was on me to just commit to something, commit. And do you know what the really beautiful thing that happened was? It is almost a relief when you say, I'm not going to look for anything else ever again. I'm just going to stick with this one thing. And so all I have to do now is focus on learning this thing and not what am I looking for next. And it's really liberating to stop looking and to just commit to something. And it could be the Droid or it could be something else. It's really important that at some point you just draw a line in the sand over what you're going to have and use. And then you make all your business the business of learning it and being really great with it, because you can do anything with enough practice. All right, now let's talk about the drums. It's a really nice addition to the Droid. And for me, the mega advantage, you've seen me use the grids before, and you've maybe in the long in the past, you've seen me use the tip-top circadian rhythms. And I like both of those ways of working. I really like being able to turn one dial and have more happen and less happen, like on a grids. But I also like Euclidean rhythms to a point. But I don't want to exclusively have Euclidean rhythms. And I don't want to exclusively have just a dial that turns things up and down, because I want to choose the rhythms. Because the reality is the open hi-hat pattern, offbeat open hi-hat with a 4/4 kick, really bloody works. And I want to have that option of just being able to reach out and make it happen when it needs to happen. You could just have handmade, but you can't just have algorithmic, in my opinion. And so what's really powerful about this sequencer that Christopher Affix Music has put together is it's both. You've got 4 tracks, and I've named them kick, snare, hi-hat, and open hi-hat. They could be anything. It's just what I've named them. And so you hit play, and it runs. We choose a track, and I can just go, let's turn up the tempo. Yeah. And let's go to the open hi-hat. Nice and simple. Sometimes that's just what you want. But then I want some hi-hats, and I don't want to program them. So I've got these 4 dials which do different things. One is the activity. If I turn it up, it's like a grids. It just adds more of a certain type of pattern. And if I turn it all the way to the right, you get 16ths. So good. So I don't have to push this button 16 times. I just turn this dial once. And if I did do this and fill this up, if I go left, it eats into the sequence and removes elements. So we can use it to both add and subtract drums with just this one knob. And if I shift click the top of the knob, because it's got a button on it, it zeroes that control. If I push this button, this will choose how much the pattern adds more at the end of the bars or the start of the bars. Go the other way. It's more on the downbeat. And if I push shift and this button, it will create a new sort of seed for the algorithmicness. So you get kind of different patterns. But the main thing is with the green dial, you turn it up, you get more. You turn it down, you get less of whatever's on the grid, which is really cool. And you can mix the two. There isn't a thing where it shows different colored lights or anything, depending on what they are. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But there isn't. But the point is you can blend the two worlds. And that's what's so insanely good about this. I want to be able to put certain things in by hand, and at other times I just want to turn this up and get 16ths or other things. We push these two together and it clears it. Another thing is I've got this button which Christopher customized for me. This used to be the fill parameter, and the way that it did work, which was also really cool, is if you held that down and programmed in some other steps, then when that was pushed lit on, then those other steps would play every second bar. Or if you held Shift and Alt, then they would play every 4th bar. So it was a way on the same grid that you could program something that happened every other bar or every 4th bar. It was a really cool system, but I decided that what would be much simpler would be if I push this button, then an LFO will basically turn this green dial a little bit for me up and down, and actually by this amount in purple here. So if I put this on, so if we listen to this, let's go, let's have a nice simple, let's zero the green. You hear how it's adding these extra kicks. If I turn this purple one down, there will be less of them. You hear? It's nice, isn't it? It's just that once that's set up, the idea is if you just want some variation, you can just turn that on. And it will just slightly vary the drums for you, exactly the kind of thing I would want. This one here is the accents. I can program an accent pattern. And you'll hear that on the hi-hats. Accent's really important. Just as a little bit of subtle modulation is important, so is accent. Eat into this. By the way, there's a length control as well, so we can have it so that the kick is 12 steps. Do sort of weird things. Haven't touched that at all yet, but it can do it. And then here we have fills here as well. I can turn that up for fill amounts. And then just the main other thing to say about this is Euclidean. So let's just zero it again. And so if we turn up the blue dial, we sow Euclidean beats. And if we push this, the red is the length amount. We also have swing. Yeah. And so that's the idea, is you've got this mixture of handmade and algorithmic all in this tiny little space. Of course, you need an output module. I'm using the X7. If you had a Droid 18, you could use that as the output. But of course, I'm using it for all the pitch stuff. So you do need an extra output module, and you can choose various output modules from the Droid. The one other thing the Droid is doing that I'm not using at the moment is MIDI out. The Droid has got MIDI out, and Christopher FX Music programmed it so that track 3, the bass voice, goes out of the MIDI out. So what I could be doing is I could have like the Juno 60, like the little boutique one. I was thinking about that because I just got one, and I could have an input module, and I could have a full little synthesizer that I programmed just sat next to the case, you know, just to the side. And I could be programming it from here and actually playing it by hand, a full voice with like full controls. You know, yeah, okay, it's small, it's a boutique, but it's bigger than this. So that would be nice, wouldn't it? And it does it. I've just not used it up to this point. The drawbacks, if you want to call it that, should be obvious. It's quite expensive because it's a boutique, handmade, extremely niche thing from a single person little company in Germany with this insane brain system that had to be designed and developed and R&D'd. It couldn't be more niche and bonkers, but also there isn't anything else like it as a result. And you can build these things that are these like brilliant hybrids of handmade algorithmic that work lots of different ways. You know, in a way, I think of this as a bit like the sort of Photoshop of sequences. I can kind of do lots of things in a sort of in different ways. There are different ways. You know, I can just do this, or I can do this, you know, or what have you, and I can change the length and do this, and you know, there's just lots of affordances that are in here. I can come on this page and shift the pitches of things around. I can arpeggiate, transpose with my little 4-track sequencer, and then do A, B, and invert things to keep things fresh. And then I've got my algorithmic drum sequencer, and I've got repetitions and patterns and things, so I could do metropolixy things. Then I've got probability as well, so I could change the probability of notes, and I can mute things on and off, remove notes from scales as well. And then, by the way, when you come into rep and pattern ratcheting, you can turn up ratcheting, and then the range repeat turns into this sort of trilling arpeggio and stuff. It does a lot, mate. It does a lot. There's nothing else quite like it. Moving on.
Welcome, everyone. This is the intermission of the video. Get yourself an ice cream, have a wee. Gin and tonics available in the bar. The second half of the video will be available very soon. Thanks very much.
So in this second half of the video, I just want to talk about all the kind of theory and the lessons and things that I've learned about doing this process of kind of building up this system and learning to play again with this new rig. It's all very well looking at all the modules, but that only gets you so far, doesn't it? How are you going to play them? You know, what's the way you do it? And what are the lessons that I learned? Firstly, I want to sort of share a little story. A few years ago, I had a sequencer called the SWT16, the Sweet 16, and it was a sort of little compact kind of grid-based thing, a bit like this. And I was really interested in it because to me, it was kind of like circadian rhythms. I had the ability to hand play in drums as I want to do here. And I thought, oh, this is like circadian rhythms and it's much smaller. Great. And I'll use that, and that will be my main input method. And as I played around with it more, I found that I was doing a lot of paging around and a lot of menu kind of swapping, page swapping to do it. I suppose as I'm doing here in many ways too, but much more so. You really had to like jump around the thing to make it do its thing. And there was a point that I just decided, I just don't want to work like this. I just want to have everything in front of me. I want as many things in front of me, one button push away as I can. And I still do want that. But a funny thing happened. After I stopped using that module, a year or two later, I saw this guy, Engineer. Engineer's the guy who's been playing with the sample drum. And what struck me most about what he was doing in his tiny little system a bit like this, he is one of the inspirations to this case, is I just saw a person having a boatload of fun with quite a small system, just throwing things together and doing the kind of improv stuff. He's got really good chops. He's got great timing. So he's just bringing in things on sick drops and so forth and keeping things fresh all the time. But what gate sequencer do you think that he was using to do exactly the thing that I wanted to do and I had decided it couldn't be done with? What gate sequencer do you think that he uses in the bottom left of his case all the time? Yes, friend, you don't have to be a genius to work out that, yeah, it's the bloody SWT16. Engineer is using the thing that I thought, it's not how I want to work, it's too menu-y. Well, guess what? He made it work. And his hand lives on that thing. You can see him flying through the menus, flying through the pages, constantly programming it with his left hand, busy, working on it, making it work. With enough practice, you can learn anything. And you can play live with anything. And to that, the reason I want to bring this up is this notion of ever seeking perfection with live systems, because I just want to point out that you don't actually need to seek perfection with a live system. You just need to make what you have work. Or I just want to say that you can make it work. Obviously, it's your prerogative to change things and to find the right value call when there's a moment that, no, really, I do actually need to swap something out because I know that what will go in will be better. But it's when you're not sure and you're like, maybe the grass is greener on this side. Maybe it is. But I'm just here to say that with enough practice, you can learn to play a violin or a theremin. Can you imagine that? Some of the hardest to play instruments can be learned. Really difficult things like learning to fly aeroplanes can be learned. I once played Moogfest with my effing iPhone and an app called Synthesizer. And the reason that I was able to do that is because I just loved that app so much. And I used it and used it and used it and used it. And I found a way of playing with it that really spoke to me emotionally. And I did it for years and years and years, and I still do. And I suddenly realized, I could just sit down cross-legged and play it. And I did, and it worked. And that's because you can play anything that you've practiced with enough. And I want to just bring this up because if we look at things like this, you may be looking at this system and you may think it looks simple enough, and it is simple because I've direct connected everything and I don't want it to be complicated. I want the art of playing this system to be not in clever patching, but in good judgment and my speed with this sequencer and the voices that I've got. That's what I need to learn. But the point is that if this looks complicated to you, and if you're looking at a device or a sequencer and you go, I can't learn that, that's going to be too difficult. I just want to remind you, for those who've learned to drive, cast your mind back to that feeling of when you were just learning to drive. Do you remember the feeling of how am I ever going to learn clutch control while accelerating smoothly, whilst also changing gears, whilst also keeping situational awareness, and while navigating roads and signaling and watching out for dangers correctly? Early on, I remember that feeling of, oh my God, I'll never learn to do all of these things at once. Yet, now you can probably drive in a completely unconscious way. I drove from Leeds to Bristol for Machina Bristronica, 4 hours in the car. And I remember thinking after I got out of the car, I have no idea how I got here. I just completely unconsciously did every single step. And once upon a time, years back, every single step of those was a conscious decision. I bring this up because that is what learning to play and improvise on any system is like too. It will feel hard and sludgy and difficult, and you will be slow and not quick off the mark and make mistakes and do the sort of musical equivalent of grinding gears. But I know that you can learn to drive. Therefore, I know you can learn to power a modular synth or a Digitact and an Octatrack or whatever it is. You can learn to drive it too. It doesn't matter what it is, but it does take practice. There's not just a magic bullet. There's not a matrix thing that can just insert the knowledge into the back of your head and just have you do it immediately. I just think it's really important to know that you're capable of it, and it's just like driving a car. Well, this is a car. You know, it's just a slightly weird car, and you can learn to drive this too. Another thing is to talk about size in cases. You know, I see people with big systems and I see people with small systems that are big. That is to say that they don't have that many things, but they've got large versions of things. There would definitely be some value in having a little more real estate to have more modulation, more this, more that. But no matter how big a system it is, eventually there has to be a point where you've run out of space. You compromise to some point. And size is a problem in the sense that if you have too many things to do, then you can't manage all the plates. But with that said, we could say the same thing about driving or flying planes. There are lots of things that airline pilots have to do and think about, so many systems and dials and warnings and indicators, but they develop ways of looking around the cockpit in systematic ways so that they can keep an eye on things. There's systems that help them learn to manage all this data. And the human brain is incredible at knowing kind of what to play with. If I actually worked out how many controls there are in this system, it would scare me. There are hundreds of things that I could potentially do. You know, actions I could take, a dial which has 13 notches or whatever, or, you know, on that range, times 16 times 4 tracks. It's hundreds and hundreds. But the brain finds a way of knowing what the right thing to interact with is. It happens with time. But just trust in the process. It can happen. But I definitely think there's something to be said for a smaller case. You know, again, quoting Surgeon, you only have to look at what he's doing. Look at what he has. He's got a T1 sequencer, like a 1010 sampler, a dub delay, and a DJ mixer, and maybe like one other synth. He's got like 5 things on the table, and they're all little tiny basic boxes, yet he makes amazing sounding music. A key factor is being Surgeon, one of the best techno DJs of like the last 30 odd years. But the point here is that less is probably more, but you can learn to play more. I personally wanted a light case that could be all in one, and I wanted it because I just don't want to have to cart big things around, and I also want to make a point of keeping things small and saying if I can't make good music with a few well-chosen things, then I don't think adding more is actually going to solve the problem, because I should be able to play good music with a few things. I shouldn't need more, so I'm not going to give myself that luxury. And when I went to play at Holding Patterns, I took my system in just a backpack and this briefcase. And I took the bus. And my hand didn't hurt. I actually walked past David Firth, if you know who he is, just on his jolly way through Leeds, a person you see around. And I was carrying this, no problem at all. That's something I could not say about previous systems. And as a final thing on kind of key lessons, I want to reiterate this thing that choosing the Droid was liberating because I could stop looking for other sequences. If I couldn't reasonably make this work, mate, is another sequencer going to be the answer? You can easily say, well, maybe you'll just find a magical way of working with that sequencer that absolutely makes it work for you, mate. Maybe that is possible. But I know that the Droid is such a device that it can be made to be like other sequencers in many respects. And I don't quite see what that magical way of working is that this does not afford. I love random voltage generators, and this is one too. As well as I can actually fine-tune those random voltages, and it's multi-track, and it's all in key, and it has this arpeggiator and this algorithmic drum thing. That's not to say that this will be the only sequencer that I ever use. That is, of course, a daft thing to say. It's just that if you can't make this work, then you can't make anything work. But I think that is equally true of any other sequencer to a degree. You can limit the scope of your music so that it's not about having some symphonic thing, but it's just about having one element. You know, I want to cite possibly one of the most inspiring pieces of video that I saw in recent years, and it is a video of an artist called Mike Inc., who I believe was the founder of the Compact record label. And Mike Inc. is playing in Leipzig in, is it 94 or thereabouts? I think it is. Mike is playing a set with a 909, a 606, and a 303, and he's got that weird like Roland Compu synth, which was the one that had kind of digital control, but it's basically like a kind of 101, 202 sort of voice. And he plays an absolutely filthy acid, brilliantly catchy acid set. And all that Mike's doing is he's banging through patterns that he's created, and he's squidging the filter and bringing things in and out on the mixer and just absolutely hoofing it through the system. And it is just one of the most joyous, fun, rapturous rave things you could possibly see. And it's just very simple. It's patterns that he's made, and he's just banging through them. So in the sense, it's the complete opposite of a improvise set, because everything's been worked out. Yet he uses patterns in a really interesting way. For example, he'll have a pattern where it's just all the snares on, like this, right? And then he'll save that, and he'll have the pattern with nothing in it. And so then he can go... and we'll save that one. Off. And he has a blank pattern that he uses for mute. And I thought just this way of using patterns, which by the way, I didn't actually mention earlier that the B32, this system does have 4 presets. And I like that way of working in it, the Mike Inc. way of saving certain patterns, including like a fill pattern. Now you can do that with this by turning up the activity dial. But the point to make is that, you know, what I do with the activity dial, I turn it up and I get more of something or less of something. Who said that you can't just have like 16 patterns that include some fill patterns and your set is just kind of banging through them in interesting ways? The point is, the sort of goal, you can make anything work if you have some intent and design by it. And simple is good. Man, that Mike Inc. thing sounds absolutely phenomenal. And so it's a reminder that just one synth voice and some banging drums can slay. So don't overcomplicate it. Maybe just one voice would be fine. And then it would be fine to just have one sequencer. Let's talk about technical things about playing the gig, and also the sort of place where I practice my system. So at home here in the studio, I've got a little keyboard stand, and I had the system on the keyboard stand at a nice height, so I could stand in front of it, not sit, stand, as I would be when I was playing, at the perfect height. Keyboard stand's really good for this. And then speaker-wise, I had these Adam D7Vs, I think that's what they're called. They're like tiny precision monitors, and I have them raised up and pointing straight at my face. I have been playing my system through headphones for far too long. I don't think headphones basically give you far too much information. To be fair, the Adams also are really detailed and sort of sharp monitors. In a dream world, you would also have a pair of speakers, PA speakers, that are facing away from you, spaced apart about 40 feet, literally pointing in the opposite direction to you, at the same time as having one awful wedge down by your side, so that you could simulate the absolute horror of garbage sound at events where you don't have any decent monitoring on stage and you're basically trying to invent music on your, music invention system with cotton wool in your ears, which is a nightmare. A nightmare that I found myself in several times. I want to point out, did not happen at Holding Patterns because I had the amazing privilege of being able to play Holding Patterns where the speakers are firing into the room and you're in the center at one end. So actually you're having the speakers pointed at you. And I want to mention this thing of monitoring because it is such a colossal clangor. It's a thing that will completely throw you, because you can practice at home in a perfect situation and then get to a venue and find that you can barely hear the system. It sounds completely different to what you're used to when you practiced. So suddenly it feels like the bottom falls out of your world. It's a really big issue. I've talked about it before, and I think, what can you do? The main thing is practice on speakers. I think you've got to have a pair of speakers to practice on, not headphones. The Adams are great, but there are many other great speakers. I don't think it's hugely important which speakers they are. I would recommend having some sort of weird grot box that's on the other side of the room that's big and bassy and floofy and kind of simulates that thing. I also got sent this thing by IK Multimedia, which is this ARC. And when I went on holiday, because I had to take my system on holiday to practice, then I basically used that as a way of having headphones in. And this simulates rooms, but this does not simulate bad rooms, which is actually a problem. I would rather it simulate bad rooms as well, so that I could kind of get a sense of being on a PA system in a non-optimal space where the speakers are facing away from me, because it's just such an unnerving thing. I recommend practice on speakers, but take headphones to your gig. The reason for this is twofold. One is if you do get stuck into the situation where you can't hear the system, then at the very bloody least you can put headphones on and at least hear some of what you're doing. But it does create this disconnected sense. That said, it can be a bit weird and unnerving to hear the crowd. It's kind of freaky in a way if you're not used to it, and I'm not that used to it. Just hearing everyone, talking or whooping, it's kind of good, but it's also like it starts to make you cognizant of the people. When there's a rule that will come up very soon that, there's a reason why that sort of throwed me off a little bit. But point is, you need headphones both as an emergency thing, but the thing you most need them for is you need a way of monitoring your system when you're setting up. When there's music playing into the house, you can't necessarily play the system into the house. So you've got to get the thing tuned and checked. By the way, there is a tuning system in here where you play all the notes at the same time on every channel. You move this into tuning mode, then all the oscillators play C, and you can tune them harmoniously and then return this to its position and they play. It's really good. But the point is you need to do that in headphones because you're not going to be able to do that into the house. So you need headphones, you need some way of hearing your modular through headphones. Might be a little submixer or a headphone module, but for the love of God, you need some way of doing it because you need to check that your system is sounding okay. A final thing to say in this section is Moritz, the guy from Demand Maschine, who is also a performer, plays with it. They both do, Moritz and Matthias. Moritz mentioned to me that you can ask to be put forward of the speakers, like to play on the dance floor. And I've never done that. There was one place that I did get to do that, actually in Leeds, years ago, and I had the best sound that I've ever had at a gig as well. So I just want to mention that as a notion. I mean, I don't know what the feasibility of that would be in every venue, and I don't feel that every venue would necessarily accommodate it, but I just want to throw out this wild idea that you could actually just say to them, set me up a table like at the front on the dance floor, and then I can face the speaker stack as Moritz does and hear what everyone else is hearing. That would absolutely be the best sound you could possibly have at the gig, and I think you'd feel the most comfortable. In any case, bring headphones as a backup. Now I want to talk about the sort of golden rule of improvisation that was in my head. If anything, it's a kind of strategy, right? What's the sort of one thing that I was thinking about as I play to try and guarantee comfort and success? And it's this. Listen. Just listen hard as F to your system above all things. Listening intently and with hyper focus on what is coming out of these chords in your system, if you listen intently, I find my brain considers what has been playing and starts to then feel in its bones what should come next. The way that happens is by listening. Now, listening might sound like an obvious thing to say. Of course I'm listening, obviously. But are you? And I'm talking to myself here, by the way. I'm not like having a go at you, but I'm just saying, you get really busy when you're managing this big system and you're in front of a crowd and that's a new feeling, or it's been a while, or for whatever reason you haven't had enough to eat, you've had too much to drink, you've not had enough to drink, whatever it may be, you're in a mental state and you're thinking about other things, you're managing systems, there's a problem with the sound, one of your modules isn't working, am I going to make that work? And actually, you're not listening in that moment. You're worrying about something. You're thinking about something else. You're thinking something else consciously. You're not listening. You have to listen. Again, I realize how obvious this sounds, but I've heard it corroborated in lots of other interesting ways. I heard a brilliant person talking about how listening is the secret to interviewing. It's a thing I've been trying to do more of in my podcast, which is, it's very hard when you're doing an interview with someone and it's lasting, it's over an hour and a half or so. You've maybe got 30 questions you want to ask that person. You're conscious of moving the interview on. There are points you want to talk about that we've not even got to yet. You've got lots of other things in your mind. But the point is to know what to ask next, to really know what to ask, and to also really know how to field a response to something that someone has said. Because that's sometimes part of it. Somebody mentions something that you weren't thinking about and takes you to a whole other place mentally. And actually, you're also trying to remember the question you've got to ask. It's the next thing up that makes sense. Suddenly, you're thrown. And the answer is listen. If you listen intently to what the person is saying, intently, then I find you naturally can field the response and you know where to take it next. It's still a factor. There is still a factor that there's an arc to a conversation that you want to get to. I personally do that. Always a kind of ahead of time, I'm thinking about the conversation that I want to have. I want to talk about these points, and then get to the end. And that's true in sets as well. I don't have like a hardcore thing, but I was thinking about the kind of how I want to begin. One of the things that I wanted to try and do is that I wanted to start from zero. I wanted to have nothing on the sequencer for this reason. Because what I wanted my set to be was like a journey. And I want to start from a little one twinkling star, just like a black night sky, and there's one little beep, one little star appears. And then another little star, beep, and another little star, beep. And by the end, I want you to basically be like, what's his chops in 2001, going through the cosmic gate. And you're sort of, we've gone from one tiny winking star to starbirth, and you wake up and you're in that weird, like, white room with an old version of yourself eating dinner. That's what I want my set to be. I want it to be like a journey, and I like that idea that it starts from zero, because why can't you do that? You can show the construction, you can show how we start from nothing, we build up, because that's actually what I'm doing. I'm improvising, so I kind of want to show that a little bit of the initial construction, and then you play it through. And listening that's the way. I do one note, then what could go with that? Then what could go with that? What could go with that? Listening. I have a note on my system. This little make noise headphone sticker is a coded message to me. It means listen. Listen and ye shall have ideas. Ye shall know where to take it next. So I hope that it doesn't seem condescending or a pointless thing to say. I actually think it's the most important thing I can possibly communicate in this entire video. It's the most useful thing that I have learned through doing. So, and I've heard other people say the same thing. Jazz musicians and so forth, and, interviewers, same thing. Listening. I'm doing a kind of journey. that starts from this little thing. By listening really hard, I then work out what the next thing to change is, and then what's the next thing, and what's the next thing, and what's the next thing, and then we just do that for like an hour. The other thing is contrast. Well, I've mentioned that before, that notion of contrasts. That's a really useful phrase to keep in your head, because what contrast means is if you've been doing a lot of busy things, then it's time to break it down to simple things again. If you're doing simple things, it's time to busy it up. If you've been doing dark sounding things, you can brighten things. If you've done bright things, you can darken things. If you've been doing simple things, you can do wave folded things. If you've been doing, warm things, you can do resonant things. If you've been doing, 808 things, you can do 909 things, and do you know what I mean? All of those are in opposition to one another, and they're the sort of manner by which you will build up a kind of arc and a crescendos and contrast. And I like it in sets a lot when you have those nice dynamics where there's a bit where you break it down. And I'm not afraid to do that in this set because it's not necessarily a dance set, where I break it down and it's suddenly we've gone from like hardcore dance and we've broken back down into just one element. And then when you've had such a busy section, then it's really refreshing to then break it down to just one little thing, just pootling by itself. And then you build it back up again. I've seen Colin Benders speak about this, about the idea of improvisation is basically surfing. I think that's true. I think it is kind of surfing because there's a degree that you need the wave to come along, and that's almost chance. I believe that through practice, you can learn to make the chance occur every time for you, more or less. But, when you're kind of experimenting, as I am, it's not always guaranteed. It doesn't always work brilliantly. You don't always get the best riff via, random means and a bit of like futzing around. It doesn't always happen, but for the most part, you can kind of get the sculpture you need. But it's about creating this kind of arc. And that just happens naturally to me through listening. By listening, I go, let's build it. Oh, and now I hear it where it could go. We could have a bit more of this happening. And I kind of push the settings to make it go a bit more in that direction and then enjoy it. And that also is another thing, enjoy it, which is to say, there is a thing that a number of people have spoken about this, where it's really tempting to change things all the time, to constantly be adjusting things and to do it at any moment. But there's an argument to biding your time and to letting things ride. A thing to say is that when you're on stage, you definitely feel that kind of pressure, that hot pressure of the audience listening, and you're cognizant that somewhere there are all these people, and are they enjoying it? Don't they want something to change? And what am I going to do next? Shit, I better work that out right now and make it happen right now. But actually, if you look at people like Colin Benders, a thing that he does so well is he waits for 8-bar changes to make the changes, and he'll remove the kick and create a lull, and then he'll do his futzing in the 7th bar, and then he'll find the things that he needs to do, and then as the 7th bar comes to an end, he's got it where he wants to be, and then he brings the kick back in. So what he's not doing is constantly changing every setting. He probably is constantly riding things like the cutoffs to keep things modulated and interesting. That is also why I think it's really important to have some modulation all the time. But it's a great one. The cutoff is it's a 50-year-old trick at this point, but it's still a good one. Keep that moving to keep things alive. But the point is, don't always be changing things mid-bar. I don't always do this. I don't always get this right. It's a thing I'm trying to learn and internalize, because I think, like driving a car, it's a grammar that you can internalize. It is a form of grammar. It's a trick you can learn to hold off making your changes for 8-bar sections. And so it's really helpful to always be mindful of the 8-bar, where you are in the 8-bar structure. And do you know the way you do that? You listen. You listen really hard, and you never stop listening so that you never lose your place. That's another reason why I don't really have any truck with cueing, because I just don't think that I could cue my modular and check something and still remember where I was in the 8-bar structure. I just do it live. Just do it live. Do it live in front of everyone. Because it doesn't matter. You can kind of bring things in and bring things, it's fine. Another thing to say you can work parts out in front of people. If you do it in a kind of slow and deliberate way, you make one change and you wait, and you make another change and you wait, and you move that down and you wait, and you move it up and you wait. You can make the slow adjustments that are actually you working out a melody in real time kind of happen in front of everyone. And it just kind of sounds like the melody is coalescing and coming to life and being developed, which it is, obviously. But then once it's developed, you leave it and you're like, oh, cool, that's our little riff for now. And now I can work on something else. You can do all that in the open. You don't need cues to do it. And I think I find the concept of having cues, I really don't know how I would do it. So the thing I've been trying to internalize is not to take things away too quickly, not to futz with things too much mid-bar unless they need to sound alive, and to wait for 8 bars to make these changes, because it helps communicate structure and satisfaction to the audience. Another thing to mention, which was another quote from Moritz of Dynamic de Machina, because he plays live, is, he's so right, is no one knows you've made a mistake when you've made a mistake. I mean, yeah, there are things that might be atonal, you bring in the wrong note, or I brought in a clap way too loud, and that's fine, you know? Hey, in a way, and actually this is something I consciously thought about beforehand, was I want to embrace mistakes, because mistakes prove that it's live, and they prove that a human is doing it. I have a thing where I realized that the audience don't hate you. You know, it's not, they're in a good state of mind. The audience don't want to see you fail. No one's come here to see you, fall on your face. That's not something that they've come to do. The audience has got you back and they're here to have a good time. If you make mistakes, quote unquote, there's 2 things to say. One is they don't know what you're doing. They don't know what your intent is. You're not communicating it to them. So you could do anything. And that's also the point. Like, you can do anything. So there's no mistakes. You don't need to worry about making mistakes. But the other thing is that they're completely relaxed and they want you to succeed. And if you do something that is atonal and suddenly incongruous and you make a face that's like it's a clanger, smile it out. It's a joke. It's fine. I mean, there was that brilliant jazz quote, which is that if you play a wrong note, play it twice. And then it's not a wrong note anymore, Let's do that twice. And I've done that, just like, oh, fuck it. Okay, I'll do it again, just to sort of make a point. By making mistakes, you prove that there really is something happening for real in front of an audience. And I think that mistakes should be considered a badge of honor in the fact that you're actually doing something risky and you are cocking up. Yeah, you can practice more and become more slick, but I would make a case that uber slicked productions veered into the uncanny valley of not being that interesting to me personally. And we find with pop productions that are absolutely auto-tuned to like the smashing degree, just Barbie pink pressed plastic through a thing. Is that interesting? And if you come to like a raucous dance set, don't you want to hear something being like hoofed through a thing, redlined, absolutely fucking punk through a system? I want to see this kind of a sense of raw, explosive excitement. I want to get the sense that there's something real happening in front of me. And if you're improvising, then my God, you're embracing that. So you've got to embrace mistakes. You've got to see them as a badge of honor and not worry about them. And if you make them, you've got to smile through them and let it communicate to the audience. Hey, I'm actually doing something really fucking hard, actually, because you are. Improvising is doing music on hard mode. I have to remind myself of that consciously, as I've just considered this a normal thing, but it's not. This is electronic music on number 11 hard. This is not supposed to be easy, so cut yourself some slack. And remember, people have come for a good time, and seeing mistakes and seeing the humanity in front of you, I think, actually endears the performer to me more. I should also mention a thing I forgot to say earlier, which is when you go to play venues, is check the height of the tables they have. Hands up, those of you in the audience who have been to shows, brought your gear, and the table is like a foot and a half lower than the one that you practiced on. So it's like this stupid sort of picnic table, the noise table, and it's way too low and it hurts your back. Well, that's a thing to take into account. There is such a thing as a rider where you write down on a piece of paper what you need. You can say to the venue, make sure you have a table for me that is 3 feet high. You need to say things like that, and you need to have them ready to communicate ahead of time, just so you don't get to the venue and they go, oh yeah, we've got these tables, yeah mate, and they're horrible. And so you actually are physically in pain while trying to perform. Make sure you have things like height of table stipulated, types of monitoring stipulated, and plug sockets. How many plug sockets you have, the type of outputs you have, make sure you've got what you need. Never assume that they have it. And so in terms of how I practiced, I would do full 1 hour run-throughs, or 50 to 55 minute run-throughs, and I would film them. I was filming them for 2 reasons. Because one, I want to have a sort of red light effect. I know that no one is actually watching me, but I am filming it. And in my mind, I am conscious that if this starts to go really well and I accidentally make the greatest piece of music that's ever been made on a modular synth, well, I'll be really annoyed if I screw it up halfway after I've had that amazing moment. And inevitably, it does start to happen when you then have amazing moments. You're like, holy crap, how have I managed to do this? But I have got this into a really good state. I don't want to mess it up from here. And that's very similar to the experience of being in front of a crowd, except that's every second, where you're just thinking, I just don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess this up. And there's a point where you stop thinking that and you return to your listening. But I think there's huge value in filming the performances. My friend Michael streams his sets. He has weekly streams booked in, so he almost uses the streams as a kind of live practice. And the fact that even just a few people, you can have 3 people tuning into the stream, but the fact is some eyeballs are watching, that creates a red light effect. There's a lot to be said for it, because the point of the red light, the point of a full 1 hour practice is that you don't stop. You have to carry on and learn how to deal with car crash situations, bad tuning, something's gone wrong, that's a bad sample choice, this selection of notes is wrong, this selection of samples is wrong, that filter's too squeaky, the reverb's making weird crackles, why is that happening, where's the gain staging problem? You have to have all of that, and you have to do it all in sort of gig conditions. So if you're going to play for an hour, you've got to play for an hour. You can't stop, because when you're in front of a crowd, you can't just stop and fix the thing. You have to learn to steer out of all these situations. Just as you learn to control skids in a car, you can't stop the car and be like, no, can we do that again? So that's how you do it. So I did 1 hour practices and I filmed them. And the other reason that I filmed them is so that I could watch them back and I could be objective about whether I was doing a good job or I was being boring. And that's obviously the main, literally my number one fear is I just don't want to be boring. But also it is really hard because you have to skirt this line of keeping it in the pocket and not breaking what's good about what you're doing in that moment, and always looking for the next thing. How am I going to twist and freak what I'm doing to create the next part, the next thing that feels like a fresh progression of what we've just done? That's a balance, and it's not easy. As I mentioned before, I'm doing this on hard mode. 1 hour practices all the way through. I think you should be using speakers, not headphones. I would definitely also encourage some kind of grot box and practicing through the worst possible speaker combination, pointing away from you, far on the other side of the room, because you may find yourself in a venue where it sounds a bit like that. There was a thing that Surgeon said to me, which was that you can be too practiced. You can be kind of bored of your setup. And he's like, I don't want to be too practiced, which I thought was an interesting one. I did get in my head. I didn't practice on the day of the performance, so there was a sense of freshness. But to be brutally honest, at this stage, I'm very new to this system, so I'm far from proficient with it as I could be. I just wanted to mention that, as I thought it was an interesting point, and Lord knows he knows what he's doing. There's a discussion to be had here about how you push things forward. I do think in your practices, you've got to be bold and push things further, do more risky things than you might do live. Because what I found is when I was actually playing at holding patterns, I wasn't quite as willing to mess things up. Like I didn't use the TBR, my 4-note sequencer, transpose sequencer at all, because this is a tricky beast to introduce and have it work musically. I've car crashed some of my practice sets with it, and I'm not comfortable enough with it. That's the other thing to say, is that you should always be cognizant of the factors in your system that you're weakest on, and you should write them down, and you should work on them. You've got to do that. Otherwise, how are you going to get better at plugging those gaps? So that's also the point of filming the practices. It's a way of being able to look back and recognize, I wasn't so good there. I see what I did wrong, and note what that is. And then, the things you're not playing with. And I do, over here, I have a little handwritten note of parts of the sequencer that I realized I was ignoring. I wasn't doing AAB, I wasn't doing inversions, so I was like, AAB, inversions. So that next time I practice, I look at that board and I go, do that. And you could even write it on the system. You could literally write AAB inversions on little bits of electrical tape and pen. Would be a very good thing to do. What am I actually doing when I play? Now, I've talked a lot about this already, but there's a couple of other little things to mention just as a sort of general process. I mentioned that I'm starting from 0, and I might not do that in a club situation where you want to come out of the gates absolutely firing and doing something cool. I might set something up there so that when I bring in the system, I hit play and something storming comes out, an already worked out idea. That's how I used to do it. In this set, for whatever reason, I just decided that's how I wanted to do it, to kind of show the process. But that's kind of how I would do it. But I'd want to be more practiced before I did that, because what I found was starting from 0 was really valuable because it got me into the listening mindset. And I think it does for the audience too, because what you want is this thing where they get into the same headspace as you, where they're intently listening to what you're listening to. There is this thing where your brain waves will literally start to synchronize because you're on the same musical journey, aren't you? You're listening to the same thing. You're actually controlling it. They're just listening to it. And so, starting small and letting them come with you on that journey is the key. You're trying to get them to hop on the little train and hold your hand and come along with you. That's actually what, that's what success has to look like. So then they get on the train like, man, and people did say that to me afterwards. They're like, you took it on a journey. I went on a journey with you. I was like, that is so good to hear, because that is actually, I just didn't want you to be jarred or sort of knocked out of it. I want you to just kind of get locked into this groove like I was. And then I'll slowly change things. I'm listening, starting from 0. In a club situation, I would start from something, and then I would be a bit more hot-footed, that I would have to immediately be like, right now, what's next? The way to sort of also work out what's next is the simple classic. Any producer would know this one, is just what's been playing too long. That's simply put, that's it. What element has been playing too long? What am I bored of? And then you change it, or you remove it. Or in my case, I found a lot of the time I would shorten things on the Percall as a way of kind of removing things. And actually this process of removal was quite helpful. But you do have to be careful with removal, because you can remove the core element that's actually making the track groove. So listening is really important to recognize what it is that is making it good. I love on the Percall that there are little LEDs that show me. I need to actually just thought about that. I am looking at those little bad boys because that's showing me what is doing what. It's then easy for me to look across and go, oh, that's that element. It's helpful to look at the LEDs so you can see what is what. And then you know what it is you need to get rid of. Then you change it, you change the tone, you change the filter, you change the melody, you change the riff, you change the gate pattern, you change the length, you change the effects. You can change any part of it, but it's about then changing it into something else. The thing that's been playing too long. Although I don't do this brilliantly, I am trying to get better at doing things in 8-bar intervals. And what I'm trying to do is think in the 8 bars, what is it I'm going to change? What is it I'm going to remove that's been playing too long? And not being afraid to let it just play for that little bit longer, because in that 8 bars, I take a step back and I give myself the moment to kind of think, all right, what's it going to be? Right, it's going to be this. We're going to mess with this at the end of 8 bars. I'm not always successful in this because I'm learning the system. And I hope with practice, then I just become so automatic. There's no thought thought, just doing it without thinking. I don't have to think anymore. I just intuit, and then I'm doing it at the right times through conscious effort. Then it becomes unconscious. And then finally, by the way, well done. You've just got through an absolutely titanic video, so more power to you, but thanks for hanging out. What could be better? What could be better? Well, as I mentioned, I think hitting the 8-bar thing, definitely, that's one of the big lessons. The Colin Benders lesson is internalizing the grammar. The grammar is the timing, the sentence structure. When things happen in techno is a really useful thing to internalize. And you can totally break it. Colin Benders, if you listen to his sets, doesn't always do this. He does bring things in and out at weird times, not on 8 bars. It's not a hard rule. But some semblance of that rule, I think, does help tracks. That I think it helps sets be more satisfying in a club. I believe that's true. More practice is what I need. I need more practice, conscious practice, where I'm working on doing that thing. Not endless noodling without goals or gains. I have to be watching my sets back and being really critical about what could be better, and then actually working on those things. Otherwise, when am I going to get better? I definitely want to experiment more with keys in this thing. It's worth mentioning that I chose the key that I was going to be in beforehand because all my practice had been in this key, which is blue. I think it's minor something. Great. Which is 5 notches up, by the way. That, whatever that root note is the one that musically spoke to me. And this happened because I changed it one time to a different key, and then I had a really bad jam that I didn't like. And that's just because, you know, you mentally respond to different keys in different ways. And so I'd like to just try different ones, find more ones and experiment and let their colors kind of come out. I mentioned before that I could definitely benefit from more modulation. I could be wiring in the step voltages of the keys, you know, the pitch information through some attenuators, or I could just be multing these voltages more and make these voices dance around a bit more. But the only thing is that I want that to happen on the beat, you know? So anyway, more modulation would definitely be helpful because modulation helps things stay interesting. Another thing is really better drums. That is to say, more to do with my drum sounds and my ability to wield the blend of algorithmic things and to have faster changes happen. A thing that I could do with remembering is to bake in, or maybe I do just pre-save some drum patterns, a bit like Mike Inc., so that I've got some, you know, a 4/4 here, a breakbeat here, a fill here, and silence there. So I've kind of got this ability to use those as a way of creating the fast 5 things change at once that you get in a production, but is very hard to do in an improvised set. Really, the only way to do that is to have more arms, or be very, very, very clever and deliberate, or actually just save a preset. When you've got, you know, your drums totting along in a really brilliant, chunky way, you save that preset in that moment. And then later in the set, you remember to come back to it. That's something I think I can do with practice. I did do that during my holding pattern set once, but, you know, I need to do it more. A thing that would be nice to mod on the Droid, I thought, would be to have activity dials, but for the 4 sequences. If I had another E4, and I could just turn and have more notes and less notes in the sequence. That's a thing I loved before in previous systems. I don't quite have that. I actually have to come in and manually, turn notes on and off. I can learn to play this better, but that just might be a thing. But it's more space and I haven't got it. I think a major place that I can spend time on is in my curation of samples in the sample drum. And that also means removing ones that I think are not working as well. Taking things out is a major benefit, so that you've just got less samples, but they all work brilliantly. The sample drum can slice breaks. So, mate, I could literally have an amen section in this, and that's just so obviously something that I need to have. You know, other rave stabs, other things. Like Engineer, he has these amazing, like, MISC sample banks that have got explosions and shouts and farts and bells and, you know, all kinds of sounds. It'd be really fun to have some MISC ones that are wacky and fun, because that's what I want to have, is more fun in the system. So there's definitely scope for that. these are all little things. These are all kind of minor things that I can improve a bit about what's already there, for the simple and final reason that, if it hasn't been bleedingly obvious throughout this Titanic video, is that the thing that will make your system better is it's me. Or in this instance, it's you, mate. You are the thing. You are the thing that needs to get better. You need to get better at your system. But no, you, I'm sorry, you're the thing. You're the thing that can make your system amazing. Not the system, you're the thing. And that comes through deliberate practice. Practice, being conscious of what you want to do, and giving yourself some of the tools that you need to do that. But there's a point where you need to realize that some kid in a bedroom is making do with some absolute pieces of shit gear and are doing amazing things with it because they have incredible intent and they're not giving up and they're just absolutely rinsing it on a daily basis. And that could be you and your live system. It might not be a modular, it might be like a Digitact, or it might just be, an iPhone app, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It's just the fact of the matter is that you'll be rinsing that thing and you will become this insane person. You'll be, I love this thing. It's the coolest thing in the world, is that mad person who's used something that wasn't really meant for something and they've become an absolute genius at it. And they've shown that it can be taken to stratospheric performance heights with nothing but sheer bloody-minded patience and deliberate effort. People who've learned to play crappy bits of equipment and just make them absolutely slam. That to me is the sort of thing to aspire to. And here I have this thing that really is an absolutely incredibly expensive, fine, high-end boutique instrument. Will I get better by just altering this and fiddling? No. Mate, you have everything you need. You have everything you need right now. And just rinse the out of what you have. That's what Mike Inc. did. He's got a few little things and he just rinsed them, just bang through patterns on a table. It's a 909, a 303, and actually quite a lot of gear. It probably costs the same as this system if you bought them all now, but that's not the point. The point is, you can buy functional equivalents of those things for very little money. So that's the moral of this video, and any video about anything like this is you can learn to play anything, but you have to commit. You absolutely can make anything work. That annoying thing, that cheap thing, that thing that's too complicated, that thing that's too simple, all of them can be made to work with effort and practice. So no excuse. I continue with my practice, and I hope you will continue with yours. Thanks very much. Bye. Nice.